In the name of Allah, the Merciful, the Compassionate, all praises to Allah, the Creator of the universes and their Sustainer, the Provider of believers and unbelievers. And may His choicest blessings be on the seal of His prophets, the last of His messengers and His holy progeny. Before we commence on the subject that we have allocated for tonight, that is astronomy, may I take liberty in about 10-15 minutes only to cover a couple of points that I have omitted but feel that ought to be mentioned on the question of creation of the heavens and the earth. We reached that fantastic verse last night when we paused in Surah Mulk, verse 3, chapter 67, in which Allah says, Alladhi, that is Him, Allah Himself, glorified and exalted, Alladhi khalaqa sab'a samawatin tibaqa. Glorified is He who created 7 heavens, He says, sab'a samawatin tibaqa, one over the other, as it were, by way of stories. So He has created 7 stories of heavens, one above the other. مَا تَرَى فِي خَلْقِ الرَّحْمَنِ مِنْ تَفَاوُتٍ. And in the creation of Allah, you will not find any difference. You will not find any fault. And then He says, oh, but have a second glance at it. Turn your sight again at my creation. فَرْجِعَ الْبَصَرَ. Return your sight to that creation. هَلْ تَرَى مِنْ فُتُورٍ. Do you notice any defect in that creation? Any rift in that creation? That is an absolutely fantastic verse to find in the Holy Book centuries ago. Now, the first point, of course, that arises is the point we were discussing of the letter 7. And as I said, that number 7 is repeated in the Holy Book 24 times. You find that word sab'a 24 times in respect of various matters. One of them is the heavens, that He has created 7 heavens. One of the subjects is the earth, as we will come to. And inshallah, from day after tomorrow, we will come down to the earth. Tomorrow we will discuss, as you saw on the agenda, the celestial objects, and day after tomorrow we will come down to earth to discuss earthly matters. And again, in 2 divisions, the creation of the earth itself, and then the creation of the specifics in the earth, like the mountains and the rivers and the seas, and etc. But that letter 7, now that letter 7 has 2 opinions on it. One opinion is that, like that word yaum that we saw yesterday, the letter 7, one interpretation is that the scientist's interpretation is, that letter 7 is not necessarily 6 plus 1, 7, or 5 plus 2, 7. It just means plural, that there are a number of heavens I have created. And that number 7 is symbolic rather than literal. Well, another interpretation, of course, is that it is literal. I was not hoping to get into that discussion this year. If, and it's a big if we continue with this discussion next year also, if you find that the subject is sufficiently interesting, this year, of course, I have chosen the obvious subjects that one cannot miss talking about, like the creation of the earth and the heavens. One cannot miss talking about them, the obvious ones. But sometimes that which is less obvious makes it more curious and makes it even more interesting. So if we do turn into the less obvious things, I was hoping that next year we discuss this letter 7, because there is evidence that the 7 may be the literal 7, and we can go into that. And so far as the earth is concerned, that there are 7 earths. One can go into those stratas, what the scientists call stratas, and there are 7 stratas, and each of them has its own function to perform. And above the sky we have 7 stratas also, and each has its own function. But all that, inshallah, if Allah so wills, but that letter 7 has its own significance. Either it is symbolic or it is literal. But in either event, that letter 7 is scientifically defensible. According to the scientific knowledge of today, that letter 7 has a meaning which has a practical effect. But the point I am discussing today is the creation itself, regardless of the quantity. Allah says that He created the 7 of them, and He created the 7 of them one on top of the other. So you can see that now the balancing exercise, and the more remote they are one from the other, the lesser the pressure on them to sustain themselves in their positions. Now, of course, it is not the orbit, it is not the motion, because when an object is in motion, it creates its own gravitational pull, and it creates its own balance as it moves around, whether on its own axis or it is around the sun. And there is the pull of the sun that keeps it in stability. So that was one concept. But now one sees an even more interesting, more detailed scientific principle coming into play, in which things are not created to go round, as I was saying yesterday, where you have our solar system, our planets going around the sun going around another sun. So it is a fantastic movement throughout the space. Allah does not create anything in waste. Nothing is created in vain. And in that space that we have, which is huge space that is available, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created so much that has fitted into all that space. Indeed, as I hope we will see this evening, scientists, the astrophysicists, by their calculations have found that there are 100 billion stars in this firmament. So when we're talking of the creation of heavens, He has not only created the sun and the moon that we see, and the stars that we see. Indeed, it is said that the galaxy that we see is perhaps the smallest of the galaxies. The other galaxies are much larger, and the total number of stars in the firmament, and according to one thought, 7 firmaments again, not one firmament but 7 firmaments, and the totality of those stars, the astrophysicists, as I said, count them at 100 billion stars. And there is a meaning for saying this, which inshallah I shall come to, because I'm a little in a hurry to finish this ayah first. It says, الَّذِي خَلَقَ سَبْعَ سَمَاوَاتٍ طِبَاقًا, and my main point is now different form of creations on heavens from the creation on earth. مَا تَرَى فِي خَلْقِ الرَّحْمَنِ مِنْ تَفَاوُتٍ, and do you see any difference in it? And indeed, when we look at the stars from the earth, we only see them glitter, we only see them shine, twinkling, the stars shine, as we say. And it's a beautiful ornament for us, as Allah has ordained. But His challenge to the astrophysicists, His challenge to the astronomers, saying, look at it again. Do you see any difference in them at all? Well, in the chapter 71, verses 15 and 16, he says, أَلَمْ تَرَوْا كَيْفَ خَلَقَ اللَّهُ سَبْعَ سَمَاوَاتٍ طِبَاقًا. Nothing additional in this verse. But the reason I cite this to you is that Allah takes so much pride in this, and indeed admonishes those who do not look at it, says, did you see how? Alam tara, have you seen how? Kaifa, in what way? خلق الله سبع سماوات طباقا, how Allah has created seven heavens one above the other. Now, my main purpose of setting out this verse to you is to justify why we are talking about what we are talking this evening. It would be less than our worship of Allah, glorified and exalted, if we did not discuss this subject. Because Allah Himself is inviting us, not inviting us, blaming us for not discussing this subject if we don't. He says, Alam tara kaifa, have you noticed? Have you taken the trouble to see that and talk about it and discuss discuss it and appreciate Allah about it, so that when we make our sajda in our salah, we know whom we are making the sajda to. We know the majesty and the might and the omnipotence of that Allah, who as a creator is so fantastic that nobody can match him. Nobody can match him. We can even say it is a challenge to any other God to do it. Indeed, isn't this what Nabi Musa alayhi salam did? Again, we will take time on this, but as I've started on it, a couple of minutes and no more, Nabi Musa alayhi salam did this. When he's sitting with Fir'aun, Fir'aun said to Musa, I am God. What God are you talking about? What about it? So, Nabi Musa alayhi salam says, Fir'aun, if that is so, then my God creates, yuhyi wa yumit, wa yumita wa yuhyi, wa huwa hayyun la yamut, biyadihi al-khayr, wa huwa ala kulli shay'in qadir. And Fir'aun says, yes, I also, I give life and I give death. And Musa says, strange, Fir'aun, that you should say that. And Fir'aun immediately issues orders that those people who are in the line to be executed on the gallows, to be hanged for offenses they've committed, should all be forgiven. You see, I've given life to the dead people. They were dead, they were to go, and I've given them life. And those who were alive, he said, well, these 5, they can be hanged. But you can see the vast difference between that God and our Allah. He is doing a favor to the guilty ones. Our Allah does not. He says, فَمَنْ يَعْمَلْ مِثْقَالَ ذَرَّةٍ خَيْرًا يَرَى وَمَنْ يَعْمَلْ مِثْقَالَ ذَرَّةٍ شَرًّا يَرَى. He who does an atom worth of good will see rewarded for that atom worth of good, and he who does an atom worth of evil will see himself punished for that atom worth of evil. So Nabi Musa leaves him on that argument. He does not think it's worth pursuing that argument further, because that is the kind of man he is dealing with. So he turns around to him and says, but Fir'aun, my God, my Allah, raises the sun from the east and sets it in the west. You try raising it from the east and setting it in the west. And Fir'aun becomes dumbfounded. Indeed, this is a great challenge from Allah, that He is the creator, and a creation of such a nature. And inshallah tonight we will see another ayah in the Quran which substantiates this particular finding. Hence the importance that we discuss these things. We discuss how Allah has created and appreciate it, because as Allah impliedly says out in this ayah, it is in the appreciation of His creation that we can appreciate His divinity. And it is in the appreciation of His divinity that our taqwa enhances, our asceticism enhances, and we become more proximate to Allah when we come to know Him better. How will I respect you better? Only after I've come to know you, and only after I've come to your virtues and to admire that in you which is unique in you. And indeed, insofar as Allah is concerned, there is so much that is totally unique about it. And he raises this issue in verse 15 of chapter 71. He says, Alam tara kayfa khalaq Allahu sab'a samawati tibaqa. And then in the 60th it says, وَجَعَلَ الْقَمَرَ فِيهِنَّ نُورًا. And then he says, he has created the moon in it to provide light. Now we will see tonight inshallah, or perhaps we can discuss it now. The moon does not create light by itself. The moon does not produce light. It reflects the light from the sun. It is situated in such a way that it receives the light from the sun and it reflects that light over to us. And in the process we get light. We see that the moon is brilliant. It is providing light, and it is indeed serving a purpose to humanity. And Allah says, وَجَعَلَ فِيهِنَّ نُورًا وَجَعَلَ الْقَمَرَ فِيهِنَّ نُورًا وَجَعَلَ الشَّمْسَ سِرَاجًا. And I have made the sun to be a lamp. And this is where the scientist gets shattered, because when he goes to the Old Testament, or when he goes to the Gospel, he finds the same word, light, used for the moon, and the same word, light, used for the sun. A greater light and a smaller light is all that the Gospels say about the sun and the moon. Quran, on the other hand, uses different words. It calls Qamara Noora and Munira, the one that provides light. Show it is not its own light, it's reflected light, but it showers light on us. And with respect to the sun, it says this is a lamp, because a lamp produces a light by itself. And we know this. Today scientists know that the shams, that the sun creates light itself, it creates energy itself, both energies, heat and light, and it does so by internal combustion. And indeed, scientists say that this creation of the sun is so majestic that there is sufficient energy in that sun to continue with that internal combustion for another 4 billion years. So how great must this creator be? What is shuddering at the same time, although that is not the subject for this year, but what is shuddering, if I might just touch on it, is that when Allah can create just this sun, which can provide so much fire and so much heat and so much light, and to last for 4 billion years, what will be that hell, that fire of hell, which He provides only to burn? The purpose of the sun is positive. The purpose of the hell will be negative. How fierce will that fire be? But there we are, all these verses in the Holy Book, and then in chapter 78, verses 12 and 13, he says, وَبَنَيْنَا فَوْقَكُمْ سَبْعَ شِدَادًا. And I have built, that's the word he used it. When in Arabic he says, وَبَنَيْنَا, bana is to build. So he says, I have built, فَوْقَكُمْ, on top of you, over your heads, سَبْعَ شِدَادًا, I have built 7 powerful things. So these samawat that we are talking about. Again, if we do discuss things next year, this is what I had planned to do next year, to go deeper than we are doing this year. Now, this year we're discussing, and obviously the first step must be the superficial one. But there are 2 schools of thoughts there also, because science has not moved up to a stage at which it can match with Quran. Science still has to catch up with Quran for leagues of distance. So there are 2 schools of thoughts. These samawat that we are talking about, are they spiritual things, like heaven, like where Nabi Isa alayhi salam is, the things that we'll discuss next year if we do, inshallah? Is that religious, or are these physical? Or are these physical heavens like Jupiter, like Neptune? These are all physical entities which we today know to be physical. But we do not know, because science does not know about these heavens. But Allah provides the answer, and I thought we must touch on this before we leave the creation of the heavens, and hence the discussion of this particular ayah. It says, وَبَنَيْنَا فَوْقَكُمْ سَبْعَ شِدَادًا. They are mighty, they are strong creations that I have made, showing that even these sab'a samawat are physical and material. They are not purely spiritual, and they are not purely aesthetic. They are literal and they are physical. This is how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala puts it. We've built above you 7 strong heavens. And for them to be strong in that way, they also physical. وَجَعَلَنَا سِرَاجًا وَهَاجًا. And we have made the sun, siraj, because that is how, that siraj literally means lamp. But that lamp obviously is the sun. But the word used in that ayah is wahaja, that is a blazing lamp. A blazing lamp. And hence, so that we do not get burned and scorched, we are thrown away 93 million miles away. But Pluto is even double the distance from us, from the sun. Double the distance. And the light from the sun to reach Pluto takes 6 hours. The ray that leaves the sun, by the time it comes to Pluto, 6 hours would have elapsed. Can you imagine that distance? And what is the speed at which that light travels? As you know, 186,000 miles per second. That That is the speed at which light travels. And traveling at that huge, fantastic, colossal speed, by the time it reaches Pluto, 6 hours would have elapsed. Can you imagine the diameter? The diameter of space. Tomorrow night, when we are discussing celestial bodies, we will discuss that theory of Einstein about the universe and the expanding universe. And Quran said that 10 centuries before Einstein was able to rise to say a thing like that. But we shall leave that till tomorrow. For today, it's sufficient that light that comes from the sun takes 6 hours to reach Pluto, but how much energy, how much light it must be producing, that light traversing all that distance ultimately reaches Pluto as well. Allah describes that magnitude of light and that magnitude of heat as a lamp providing blazing heat, blazing fire, and calls it Sirajan Wahaja. But when the scientist sees those words, he realizes that these are not words written by a layman, these are not words written by an amateur. Na'udhullah, they are literally written by the one who created the sun and knows exactly how it functions. Proof of authenticity of the Quran lies in the details of the Quran. The first 2 nights we were discussing broad principles, but as we condescend into the details, we see the reality of Quran. And we need to do this so that we come to see exactly the inner truth that is lying in Quran. Mere recitation of those ayats in a parrot fashion does not give us this knowledge. And then the last verse that I wish to discuss in this particular context is verse 12 of chapter 65, in which Allah says, Allahu alladhi khalaqa sab'a samawatin. He is the one who created 7 heavens. No further point there, but the next one, وَمِنَ الْأَرْضِ مِثْلَهُنَّ. And of the earth, a similar number. This is the point I was making earlier. That letter 7, not only 7 heavens, but 7 earths too. Now what does that mean? What does Allah mean there? The scientist himself is not sure that what exactly is meant by 7 earths. I have always prayed for those companions of the Imams who asked them complex questions and got simple answers to those complex questions, and we benefited from them. And in the last 10 years I have kept quoting those questions that they asked and the answers that they were given. But I wish this was asked to one of the Imams. Exactly what does the 7 earths mean? Does it mean from the crust to the center of the earth? Because there are 7 stratas there also. Is that what Allah means? I was hoping that if we discuss this subject again in Greater Depth next year, we discuss the aquatic life. We are talking of the heavens and the earth. How about what is below the earth? And indeed, so much work has been done by the scientists on what is below the earth. And indeed, Sir David Attenborough's latest remarks are that it may not be possible to explain the existence of what is under the oceans except on a belief of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He did not use the word Allah, of course, but I substitute that word for what he used. The words he used were that except that this creation is by a power that we humans cannot even imagine about. And this is what As-Sadiq alayhi salam told us, that when you sit to think about Allah, you will never get anywhere near knowing Allah, because His creation is of such a nature that our mental, intellectual capacity does not reach His level of existence and His level of being and power and authority. Enough that we say, La hawla wa la quwwata illa billahi al-aliyyil azim. Enough that we say that and bow down in sajda to Him. Because one can see from the way He has created all this, how all this functions. Yesterday, on the subject of creation, I was dealing with that ayah which said that 4 eons, 4 eras have been spent by Allah, glorified and exalted, in only providing sustenance for what He created in the first 2 eons. He spent 2 eras of the 6 eras in the creation, and then 4 in making sure that there is sustenance for it. That procedure that Allah undertook, by which He provided sustenance. And it is amazing to see how many spheres of life there are where sustenance will be required. But indeed, how many spheres of non-living things there are that require sustenance. And if we go into this next year, we would perhaps discuss about stones and rocks. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala deals with that in Quran and says how He provides sustenance, rizq is the word He uses, to stones and rocks. And when we look at it, we perhaps read this, and the companions of the Holy Prophet, peace be upon him and his progeny, read this spiritually only. The scientist has no spiritual dimension to his studies. He says that one can actually see that there is sustenance even to the stones and rocks in a physical way. So you can see the immense power of Allah and the inscrutable way in which this creation has come about. So in this ayah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Allahu alladhi khalaqa sab'a samawati wa min al-ardi mithlahunna yatanazzalu al-amr bainahunna. The command descends among them. Why? لِتَعْلَمُوا أَنَّ اللَّهَ عَلَى كُلِّ شَيْءٍ قَدِيرٌ. So that you come to realize, so that you come to know that Allah has power over all things. أَنَّ اللَّهَ عَلَى كُلِّ شَيْءٍ قَدِيرٌ وَأَنَّ اللَّهَ قَدْ أَحَاطَ بِكُلِّ شَيْءٍ عِلْمًا. And He encompasses the knowledge of everything that is around. Now that again is an important conclusion of that ayah, which makes you and I appreciate why we are discussing these things. He says, we discuss these things and talk about them so that we come to know that Allah is the one with power over everything. And He is the one who comprehends knowledge of all these things. Well, an important point to end that verse with, because when we're discussing scientific facts, we rely on the Holy Book, because it is He who has knowledge of all these things and not the scientist. The scientist is doing no more than trying to learn about it. And we are grateful for any knowledge that we can get by which we can understand Allah better. But what the second thing that I want to deal with before I part with the subject of creation is that Allah does not only deal in Quran with the creation of the heavens and the earth. He deals with a third creation in this context, and that is of the creation of things between the earth and the heavens. Now can you imagine? And there are various ayats of Quran which talk about it. For example, chapter 20, Surah Taha, verse 6, Allah Ta'ala says, Lahu ma fi samawati wa ma fi al-ard. Whatever is in the heavens and in the earth belongs to Allah. Meaning, He has proprietary rights over them. He created them. He can destroy them, He can sustain them, He can do what He likes with them. Because the power is His, and the authority is His. He says, Lahu, and you have got exactly those words in Ayat al-Kursi, Lahu ma fi samawati wa ma fi al-ard. And those words are here in Surah Taha, but carry a step further. Lahu ma fi samawati wa ma fi al-ard wa ma baynahuma wa ma tahta thara. And what is between the earth and the heavens is all created by Him, and what is tahta thara, what is beneath the soil, which is not our subject of discussion this year. Well, what is between the heavens and the earth? What is this that Allah Ta'ala is now talking about? And again, in Surah 25, He mentions this. Alladhi, verse 59, Alladhi khalaqa as-samawati wal-ard wa ma baynahuma في ستة أيام. Further clarification. Those 6 periods that we are talking about, science is not able to say what came in what periods, and will never be able to say. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives further amplification on this, that in those 6 eras in which all this creation took place, it was not only the creation of the heavens and the earth, but even the creation of what is between the heavens and the earth. All that also took place في ستة أيام. And then he says in chapter 50 verse 38, وَقَدْ خَلَقْنَا السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ وَمَا بَيْنَهُمَا فِي سِتَّةِ أَيَّامٍ وَمَا مَسَّنَا مِنَ اللُّغُوبِ. And although he created them in 6 eras, no exhaustion touched them. That concept in the Gospels, that he created in 6 days and then rested on the 7th day. You can see that concept totally contradicted by Quran. Quran says no exhaustion even touched it. The exact words are وَمَا مَسَّنَا, did not touch him. Massa is touch him. مِنَ اللُّغُوبِ, any weariness, any tiredness has not even touched him. لَا تَأْخُذُهُ سِنَةٌ وَلَا نَوْمٌ, as you say in Ayat al-Kursi. It does not touch him. He does not even nod out of exhaustion from what he has created. And we only say Subhanallah, Subhanallah, that he should have created all this and weariness does not even touch him. And why is this? Because when he decides on anything, وَقَضَى أَمْرَهُ فَقَالَ لَهُ كُنْ فَيَكُونُ. We saw that yesterday. That is how he carries out his creation. Well, in short then, what is this that lies between the heavens and the earth? Are they the stars that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is talking about? Because if they are stars, and although we're touching on stars from the manifest angle, if we go into details next year, and the choice will essentially be yours. I shall leave you to go through this exercise of 10 majalis. During question and answer, you can give me your views as to what you think we should do next year, because I only want to do that which spends your time usefully. I treasure, I value your time, and therefore it must be spent in a way you find it useful. Well then, are these the stars? Because if they are, then there is so much that is now becoming more and more apparent about the stars, scientifically, which enables us to examine various ayats of Quran on stars and know the truth about these stars. As Quran says, they are born and they die. Well, that's a beautiful concept. Science today has come to learn how these stars are born and how they die. Is this then what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is talking about when He talks about things that are between the earth and the heavens? As I said, 100 billion of them. The majesty of that part is that when one thinks of them, one finds that some of those stars are so huge and they have their own solar systems then. They are so huge that maybe our sun is only 1/10 in diameter of those other big suns. So it is a very humbling experience, very trophying experience to study how much greater those other stars are and how well protected they are and how much more powerful they are. And how much light, therefore, and heat those stars would produce. But all this shows the majesty of Allah, and this is why, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala discusses these scientific facts, one finds that His glory is also illustrated and enunciated in those ayats. Ali Azizul Alim, that He is mighty, He is powerful, and He is knowledgeable. As we saw, Ahata bi kulli shay', He comprehends, He encompasses all knowledge. But apart from these ayahs that we saw, there are some over 40 different verses in the Holy Book. I, of course, in my limited time, will not even conceive of putting them forward to you. but only to look at a few, so that we get a sample of these verses in the Holy Quran, and so that if we cannot understand the general reflection of the sky, if I may call it the sky rather than the samawat, if we want a general reflection of the sky, then we can have some taste of the creation of these astronomical objects as we know them today. And in Surah Qaf, chapter 50, verse 6, Allah says, أَفَلَمْ يَنْظُرُوا إِلَى السَّمَاءِ Do they not look at the sky فَوْقَهُمْ above them? Do they not look at the sky which is above them? It's an invitation to us to keep looking up at the sky. It's an invitation, it's in a way an admonition to us that why don't we look at the sky? Because if we look at the sky, we will get even a better perception of this Allah who has created all that is in it. And he proceeds in that ayah to explain what we will see if we do turn our eyes towards the sky. The rat race in which we live today is in a way calculated to deny us the pleasure of knowing Allah and worshipping Allah. Why are we created, for that matter? He says, I've only created you so that you worship me. Kuntu kanzun makhfiya. I was a hidden mind. And that is how vast Allah is. He describes himself as a mind. He says, I was a hidden mind. I felt I should be known. And hence I created all that I created so that I become known. And hence if we want to know, and that is Hadith Qudsi, by the way, if we want to be known, if we want to know Allah, to fulfill His desire to be known, then He says one of the ways in which we can do it is by looking up. And indeed it is a good thing to put our heads up like that, to see into the sky and feel the firmament that lies there. Then we can see how small our earth is. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that, أَفَلَمْ يَنْظُرُوا إِلَى السَّمَاءِ فَوْقَهُمْ كيف بنيناها وزيناها وما لها من فروج, so that they can see what we have built. بنيناها. If they look up, they will see what we have built and what we have adorned, what we have decorated in the sky. وزيناها, how we have decorated the sky. And thirdly, وَمَا لَهَا مِنْ فُرُوجٍ, and they will see no defect in that creation. Allah takes pride in the perfection with which He created all this. And that is of essence to our discussions, because that is the scientific teaching in Allah which gives us a sample of the way in which Allah creates. When He creates us, He says, وَتَبَارَكَ اللَّهُ أَحْسَنُ الْخَالِقِينَ. He says, glory to Him who is the best of the creators. Now, when one sees that perfection in this creation, one finds that the scientist cannot but be a Muslim. He cannot but accept Islam and accept the existence of Allah. Because if all this came about by itself, if chance and just good luck, whatever luck means if there is no Allah, then if it is just a matter of chance, then all this perfection could not have been brought about. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in emphasizing that perfection, is emphasizing that these things could not have just happened by itself. Of course there was smoke, but from the smoke a nebulous was formed. And it is from this nebulous that other things were deliberately created and fashioned. They are just not created in a rugged way. They are just not created in a flimsy, haphazard way. They are created in a distinct way. So are the seas, so are the oceans, so are the mountains, so are the clouds. And each therefore function in a perfect way. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala therefore says, turn your eyes up and see. كيف بنيناها وزيناها, how I built it all up and how I've decorated it. وَمَا لَهَا مِنْ فُرُوجٍ. Indeed, whatever the depth of the stars, whatever the inner secrets of the stars, whatever the value of the stars, it is so comforting, it is so beautifying to look up and see them twinkle in the way they do. Because that in itself, to the mariner, they are a guide, they are a blessing. And to us, they are a blessing too. But those matters aside, merely looking at it is enough to make us remember Allah and take out the speeds of Allah. And another ayah he says, خَلَقَ السَّمَاوَاتِ بِغَيْرِ أَمَدٍ تَرَوْنَهَا. I have created these heavens without pillars to hold them. Now, this is a fantastic ayah that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala puts forward in Quran. There are no pillars that hold these stars, and yet they do not collapse. There are no pillars that hold the sun. Indeed, one can take the argument one step further and say there is no pillar that holds the earth where it is on its orbit. Now, you can imagine, it took us centuries. If the earth has been created billions of years ago, and man has been on this earth for thousands of years, it has taken man thousands of years to come to understand the earth on which he lives. And how the gravitational pulls and the gravitational forces work in such a way that all these planets are in their places and none collide with the other. And there are no pillars at all. Now what is the importance? We today find it unnecessary to say that there are pillars, because we know the pillars could not have held them. What kind of pillars do you have that will hold the sun, which is as powerful as we have just described it to be? But it is important, but there is an important point here, because at that point in time when the Holy Prophet, peace be upon him, and his progeny was receiving these revelations and transmitting them to the people, the notion that was carried in the world, the thought that was carried in the world was that there are pillars that hold the sun and the pillars that hold the moon, and this is why they are standing in the sky. But this is why Allah Ta'ala says that are there pillars Amadin tarawnaha that you can see? You cannot see any pillars, and pillars are things that are seen. So where are they? And this thought is contained even in the previous scriptures that came before Quran. This is the point I was making in the very third sitting that we had last night. That Quran not only sets out what is accurate, but omits that which is inaccurate. All those false things that were spreading at that time are not found in Quran. There are no pillars at all. Allah has so arranged that they remain there. And indeed, the verse, this is Surah Al-Nahl, verse 22, chapter 22, verse 65, that you recite in Surah Al-Simad. He says, وَيُمْسِكُ السَّمَاءَ أَنْ تَقَعَ عَلَى الْأَرْضِ إِلَّا بِإِذْنِهِ. And Allah holds back the sky from falling on the earth. He holds the entire, all this that we see, 100 billion stars, He holds them back so that they do not fall on the sky. And indeed there is a specific stratosphere in the atmosphere which acts as a protecting layer and stops things coming down onto the earth. But that is not what we are discussing here. We are discussing how each one of them is so created that it holds on its own. And as it holds on its own, it does not fall on the earth. But then Allah puts an injunction, He puts a proviso there. It says, إِلَّا بِإِذْنِهِ, except if Allah allows it to do. And a time will come when Allah will allow things to fall onto the earth, and the earth then will shake. إذا زلزلت الأرض زلزالها وأخرجت الأرض أثقالها. That atmosphere will then come about. So Allah says, I have created them in that way, but I have not created them in that way so that even I myself am unable to dismember them. Just as I put them together, I can make them asunder. And He says, when He so wills, He will be able to do it in that way. Surah Rahman, that you recite, it says, وَالسَّمَاءَ رَفَعَهَا. I have heightened, I have raised the sky, the sama, the heaven if you like. وَوَضَعَ الْمِيزَانَ أَلَّا تَطْغَوْا فِي الْمِيزَانِ وَأَقِيمُوا الْوَزْنَ بِالْقِسْطِ وَلَا تُخْسِرُوا الْمِيزَانَ. Those golden words of Surah Rahman. And then in that sama, he says he has kept a mizan, a scale, so that justice, so that everything works on justice. And indeed what it means is, why the scale? And the second ayah, of course, is for the earth. Allah تطغوا في الميزان. And the third for you and I, وَأَقِيمُوا الْوَزْنَ بِالْقِسْطِ. And deliver your supplies justly. Deliver what you have agreed to deliver. وَلَا تُخْسِرُوا الْمِيزَانَ. And do not give less in weight than you have contracted to do. If you have agreed to sell 1 kilogram, sell 1 kilogram and not 990 grams. If you have agreed to charge, and I'm talking with professional people in mind, per hour, then if you have worked for 5 hours, do not charge for 5.5 hours. That is mizan also. But what is this mizan in the sky? That mizan in the sky is the mizan by which the sun is gauged, that it does not travel at a higher speed than it should, that it does not, that the earth does not take more than 365 days on its orbit. It does not take less than 365 days on the orbit. All those, Allah says, are kept in balance. And to keep things in balance, you need a mizan. But science enables us to understand all these ayats. And indeed there is nothing new therefore in science that Surah Rahman has not already set out for us. And indeed he says, قُلْ مَنْ رَبُّ السَّمَاوَاتِ السَّبْعِ وَرَبُّ الْعَرْشِ الْعَظِيمِ. Then says, who tell us, who is the Rabb, who is the sustainer? And this is a challenge to the scientists of today. It's a challenge to the astrophysicist. He says, Man Rabbis Samawati wal Ard. Who is the one who sustains? Qul Man Rabbus Samawati Sab'a wa Rabbul Arsh al-Azim. And who is the Rabb? Who is the one who sustains the Arsh al-Azim, the mighty throne in the sky? Well, creation of the earth is one thing. Its sustenance, to be a rubber of it, is quite another. What science and all these Big Bang theories that are being flung around us, they only establish the question of the creation of the earth. Science does not even get anywhere near discussing the sustenance of the earth. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala raises that question. But I must give you the reference that is in Surah Mu'minun, chapter 23, verse 86, in which he specifically raises this question. And then in Surah Jasiyah he says, وَسَخَّرَ لَكُمْ مَا فِي السَّمَاوَاتِ وَمَا فِي الْأَرْضِ جَمِيعًا مِنْهُ. But that is a fantastic concept that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala raises. However much we thank Him for it is little. He says, I have subjugated, I have subjugated for you, lakum, everything that is in the heavens, ma fi samawati wa ma fi al-ard, jami'an minhu, all from Him. Everything that is in the earth and in the heavens are from Him. But He says He has subjugated all that for us. That is the sun and the moon and the stars that we are discussing. All of them are subjugated to us, He says. إِنَّ فِي ذَلِكَ لَآيَاتٍ لِقَوْمٍ يَتَفَكَّرُونَ. And in that there is a sign for those who are prepared to sit and think. But if we are not prepared to sit and think, we just run around the world to earn a few rupees in the morning and a few rupees in the evening, it takes us nowhere. We must be prepared to sit and think how it all functions and how Allah controls it all. Because it is in that thought that we are able to see how Allah has created all this for us. The sun providing heat. Can you imagine what would happen to us without the heat? The sun providing the light and providing the orbits whereby we can calculate the days and the years. Can you imagine for yourselves life without sun and the moon and the stars? And if we cannot, then Allah says, I have created all this for you so that you benefit all it, and I have made them all subservient to you. And in Surah Rahman, again in verse 5, He says, وَالشَّمْسُ وَالْقَمَرُ بِحُسْبَانٍ. I have made the sun and the moon to function on a set calculation. Now that is for us, so that we know exactly when the day comes, when the night comes. Can you imagine a life in which it is just day all the way through, or it is night all the way through? This is not how Allah fashioned our lives. And how would we be with that sort of setup? Allah says, all that is for you. And then He says, وَجَعَلَ اللَّيْلَ سَكَنًا. He has created the sun and the moon so that there is night, and He has appointed the night for rest, not for all-night parties. Oh no, for rest He says, وَجَعَلَ اللَّيْلَ سَكَنًا وَالشَّمْسَ وَالْقَمَرَ حُسْبَانًا. And I have made the sun and the moon so that they provide a reckoning for you, because they provide our calendars and they provide everything that is there. But the important thing is to be able to think why things are happening, why Allah has done things in the way He has done things. And the same applies to the representatives of Allah. What is required is to think why representatives of Allah act in certain ways. For the people in the time of Imam Hussain alayhi salam, to think, how is it that a person like Yazid can be tolerated to ask for allegiance for a person like Imam Hussain alayhi salam? And when that by our thought he says, Mithli, La yubayu mithla, a person like me does not give allegiance. He does not say, I will not give allegiance. And there is a world of difference in that. The point of principle that Imam Hussain alayhi salam makes is when he says, La yubayu, he says a person like me does not make allegiance, does not give allegiance to a man like Yazid. In other words, what he's saying is that any person in my position, any thinking person, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Quran, any thinking person, any reflecting person would not give bay'ah to Yazid. And indeed, at Dhul Ism, as I've already said, and on Ashura Day in his khutbahs, he has turned around and asked them, how can you make bay'ah of Yazid when he violates every ayah of Quran and he transgresses and contravenes every sunnah of the Holy Prophet? And I will not be prepared to do that. And I am the first, being the grandson of the Holy Prophet, to refuse to make bay'ah of that kind of a person. And are you not thinking exactly those words Imam Hussain alayhi salam uses in his khutbah to the people who are fighting him on the day of Ashura? It is an amazing situation. When arrows are flying and when swords are being hurled at him, his concern is not the battle. His concern is to reach that message to those people, that you cannot, out of your freedom, exercise your freedom in such a way that a vicious person becomes your spiritual leader. These are contradictions in terms, which Imam Hussain alayhi salam was out to point out. But of all the people, all the companions of Imam Hussain alayhi salam who were there, the one we envy most is Habib ibn Abi Talib. Is Habib ibn Abi Talib. We envy him because everybody who was with Imam Hussain alayhi salam went with Imam Hussain alayhi salam. They joined Imam Hussain alayhi salam at some stage or the other. They joined him when he left Medina. There are those who joined him when he was in Makkah. There are those who joined him when he left Makkah. There are those who joined him en route. But they all joined him at some stage or the other. Habib, on the other hand, was not able to join Imam Hussain alayhi salam because of the circumstances in which he was in Kufa. However, a time comes when a letter is sent out. A letter is sent out by Imam Hussain alayhi salam. What an honor to Habib. In which he writes a letter as a dear friend would write to another loving friend. He says, Habib, you might have heard that I am now in Karbala. I am in Karbala, but Habib, I am surrounded by enemies. And I have very few friends around me to help me. If you care for Ahlul Bayt alayhi salam, and you care for me and love me, this is the time to join me. Come over to Karbala so that you can help me in this affair and fight alongside with me. And of course, Habib ibn Abi immediately comes, and when he comes, one spear is taken out. When the spears were divided on the Ashura, after the troops assembled there, Imam Hussain alayhi salam kept one spear aside, and a companion says, Ya Ibn Rasulullah, why are you setting this away? Give it to us, we will use it. Give it to me, I will use it. Imam Hussain alayhi salam says, a dear friend is going to join him, and I have set aside this spear for him. How fortunate was Habib, how fortunate that he should be treated in this way. But Habib himself is not satisfied with this. He looks at us and envies us. We turn around to him and say, Ya Mawla, how can you help me out? Indeed, it is narrated that an alim sees Habib ibn Fadayl in a dream, and he is very despondent, he is very disappointed with himself. This man turns around to him and says, Habib, how can you be in this state? I thought you would be rejoicing the great company of Imam Hussain alayhi salam. Why are you displeased with yourself? You gave your life to Imam Hussain alayhi salam. And he says, when you people sit in the majlis of Imam Hussain alayhi salam, and when you people are weeping over Imam Hussain alayhi salam, I feel deprived of that great privilege to sit on this carpet and weep on Imam Hussain alayhi salam. When I come to that majlis and I see you people weeping over Hussain alayhi salam, and I see what satisfaction that gives to my Hussain alayhi salam, what satisfaction it gives to Fatima Zahra salamullahi alayha, I say to myself, I wish I could also be sitting on that carpet, and I also shed tears on Hussain alayhi salam, and be worthy of this pleasure that Bibi Fatima alayhi salam obtained from it, the consolation rather that she obtained from it, and the satisfaction she derived, that there are those who are prepared to spend time thinking of my Hussain and the troubles on him, and even weeping and lamenting over him. Such is the value Habib places on your coming to these majlises and weeping over it. Habib, therefore, knowing the value of Imam Hussain alayhi salam, fights the next day. Along with it, he was one of the commander to the west of the army. Fights with Imam Hussain alayhi salam until that stage comes. Indeed, he even survived that Salatul Zuhr and was able to fight after that. And when that time comes, when he calls Imam Hussain alayhi salam for help, Imam Hussain alayhi salam gallops to the body of Habib and says, Habib, ya Habibi, I call you to help me and to be with me. I know you did all you can and you would have given your life for me. But now, Habib, who do I look to? Who do I turn to and say, Habib, I am alone? Because truly now I am going to be alone. And Imam Hussain alayhi salam remembered Habib at the time when he was all alone. Now he has done the last wida, the last salutation in the tent. He comes out. He has already saluted. Ya Zainab wa ya Kulthum, ya Sukayna wa ya Ramah wa alaykum salam. He has given the last salam. He sits on that horse on the Zulfiqar and says, Hal min nasirin yansuruna, Hal min mughithin yughithuna. Is there anybody who will help us in this stage of loneliness which we experience? Is there anybody who will answer to this call of mine? And then when he does not receive a reply, he first turns to the right and says, Aina, Habibi, Habib ibn Fadayl. Where is my loving friend? Habib, where is my Habib ibn Fadayl? That he should come and help me in this dire need. And then turns around and calls the other, including Aina, Akhi Abbas, where is Abbas to help me? And indeed it is with those thoughts that Imam Hussain alayhi salam goes out to fight until he gives his life also. And even then, even after giving his life, Imam Hussain alayhi salam rewards Habib. Today when we go to Karbala and we enter the haram of Imam Hussain alayhi salam, we first pause and salute Habib. We say, Assalamu alayka ya Habib ibn Fadayl al-Asadi. And only having saluted Habib, we are able to enter in and say to him, Assalamu alayka ya Habib. That must have ألا لعنة الله على القوم الظالمين وسيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون إنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون. رحم الله من يقرأ الفاتحة.